that's actually how I think I got my name out there, is by creating content that nobody else was willing to do, because it's just not cost effective to do. To take a video and chop it into 30 different time-stamped pieces, condense it down into a 2-minute thing. Like, in order to have somebody do that for you, they're probably gonna charge you $200 an episode. And that's how people really kind of, I think, saw me and what made me stand out at the very beginning. And it's been a very creative process for me. It almost feels like it's like my way of being the Picasso painter.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I'm your host, as always, Yona Weiss. With me today is another famous podcaster. You may have heard of him before, Ruben Greth, the host of the Capital Raisers Show. Excited and grateful to have you today, Ruben. How are you?
Dude, I am fantastic. Super excited to be on your show, man. We're going to have a blast today.
Yeah, I love it. I love when I always have another podcast host who is as versatile as someone like you, who's been doing it for years, and you know exactly what goes into it. Occasionally you may have a nervous guest and they don't really know what to say and a little timid and bashful. Not the case with Ruben, guys. I can guarantee you. So he is, like I said, the host of the Capital Raiser Show, been doing this for a couple of years and really has been successful, raising a lot of money, has recently joined up partners with Andy McMullen with the Legacy Acquisitions. One of the things they're taking down, besides for raising capital for amazing multifamily investment properties, is something called build to rent, single family, horizontal multifamily, as we like to call it. Well, yeah, I'd love to just hear, Ruben, give us a little bit for our listeners who don't know you and maybe haven't yet been privileged to hear your show yet. Tell us how you got started.
Originally, it was by creating what I didn't know was then called an interview-based thought leadership platform. I was raising capital for small fourplexes and 12plex in Phoenix during the real estate crash. And we were telling people on the YouTube channel that this was probably going to be the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of our lives. And it turned out to be true, right? Because the stuff that we were buying for $20,000 a unit that were block built fourplexes are now selling probably for $125, if not more, $1,000 per unit. But my partner and I kind of split up. I was doing some marketing stuff and he was not showing up because he was unwilling and unable to outsource and leverage other people to do the things that he really liked to micromanage. Mm-hmm. So we started kind of getting into some challenging conversations. I went my own way and had this limited mindset at the time that multifamily investors did not grow on trees. This was my belief system at that point. So I went back to corporate America, eventually could not stand being behind a desk anymore. I quit, left, went down to Mexico, met my wife, eventually ended up coming back to the United States. And I found out about this thing called syndication. All that I knew was raising from joint venture partners for fourplexes. And then they told me, hey, if you really want to scale, try this syndication model. You can go a lot quicker if you do this as a team rather than as an individual. So I joined forces with the local mom and pop syndicator that was doing heavy lift stuff in Arizona, started the show to raise national exposure and awareness to their brand, and then eventually met so many capital raisers and syndicators that I started contemplating, well, how do I put these guys together and make money? And I was interviewing attorneys quite frequently, and they told me, hey, if you really want to put these guys together, the only way that you can legally do this and stay compliant within SEC guidelines is you have to start your own fund. So I left them and then partnered up with Andy McMullen, who had already done a few funds. He's like, hey, instead of starting your own fund, which is going to cost you a bunch of money, and then you're going to have to create a website and do systems and automated emails and all this stuff, why don't you help me with some of that stuff in the marketing and the national exposure? And then you can leverage my track record because I've done a bunch of funds. I have raised $20 million already. And then we can combine forces and then spread our message to the world. And I was like, sign me up for that all day long. Right. So I came on board with him, and we do kind of two branches of capital raising, one where we raise money for other sponsors, multifamily value add sponsors. And the other thing that we are very heavily invested in is the build to rent communities. And we're spending a good time in that space right now, growing and developing and trying to become the go-to guys in that space, right? So helping capital raisers, helping limited partners, and helping our own bloodlines and generations of wealth into the future with what we're doing and creating an economic impact. So it's a lot of fun, man.
Yeah.
And the show is a lot of fun too, dude. So I can imagine how much fun you're having on your show.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that, what you did was you kind of fell into it more than anything else, but you created this podcast and it was something that you were enjoying doing, and just talking to all these successful people over time. Obviously the message, hit a certain place in you that was like, I can do what they're doing. Like, this is not brain surgery. I don't need to, be sexual. And what you said earlier is you didn't think that syndicators grew on trees. And the fact that now you see that, well, really they do, meaning they're everywhere and anyone can really do it. You don't need any special background or any special licenses or anything like that to really do it successfully. You just need, what is it that you need? You just need the ambition, really, right?
Syndicators and fund managers are typically not hanging out on every street corner, but if you know where to look for them, which is essentially just go to someone's podcast and look at the number of people that have been interviewed, and they always, what's interesting is they always leave their contact information. They want to be reached out by you. So you kind of change your perspective and say, well, maybe these guys do want to partner with me in some capacity. And if you talk to enough of them and make enough relationships with them and you have a friendly, positive attitude, eventually you end up doing business with them.
Awesome. Love that. It's such a great approach because that's what I'm doing as well. And to a certain extent, obviously from a different angle currently, but my goal is, as many know who have listened to the show for a while, is to be more active in the kind of creating a fund and doing it that way as well. So that's definitely something, not the capital raiser show, not that level, but at least, doing something.
One of the things that made the show so successful was that there was nobody else doing a show that was helping people learn about raising capital. And it's such a diverse world that you start expounding upon and realizing that it may be just a little niche, but there's an entire universe in that niche. You can raise in a variety of capacities. There's marketing and branding and mindset and spiritual and living the golden rule and all these concepts that really affect whether or not you can become an effective capital raiser. And I've got to explore a lot of them and then learn to allow my particular interest in spirituality shine through and select, kind of do it in such a way where a select audience has kind of become a cult following of the learning that we all do together, including myself on the show. So I'm sure, as you are interviewing people as well, you're learning so much about it and making these great connections just like I am. And it's a great, great platform, the podcast platform.
100%. So if anyone's interested in learning about how to raise capital and different angles of doing it, I definitely recommend you checking out that show. I want to touch a little bit, because something we've really never spoken about before on this show is this build to rent model that you guys are doing. What's interesting about it is because it's a ground up development essentially, but you're building single family homes in a community, in a development. And instead of selling them off to individual buyers, you are keeping them as rental properties, which essentially, like I said at the beginning, is like horizontal multifamily, right? What's the typical exit strategy for something like that? Because when you have a multifamily property, it's changing hands. There's this buyer's adding value and then selling to the next at a lower cap rate or whatever. What's the typical exit strategy for something like this?
It depends on what your market and your goals are, right? So in Phoenix, a lot of people that are doing build to rent, they're building these subdivisions and then they're selling them off as single individual homes. So that was particularly popular, about 10 years ago, and it's grown. And what we are trying to do, which not everybody can wrap their mind around, is we're building out a subdivision, renting it out, and that has its own benefits because the renters typically like to stay there and treat it like a home because it's got a backyard and driveway and a doggy door and stuff like that. And what we do is we rent the entire community out and sell it off to an institutional buyer who is really not looking at the exit price on an individual house by house basis as much as taking control of the entire property and analyzing the income of it And the same way that you would analyze a multifamily property versus analyzing a single family, it's not based off of what the neighboring properties are worth. It's based off of how much income the whole thing is producing. So there's these institutions that are looking to park their money and get tax benefits, which I'm sure you talk about quite a bit. And then they buy these entire communities one off. And then what's kind of fun about development is there's all these forcing of appreciation plays along the way. So every time you entitle the property or put utilities on the property or put plumbing and infrastructure and put in like a retention pond or, sewage or whatever. At every single point as you're building it, you're putting in the concrete slabs. And then as you're building the frame and then putting in the roofs, at every single point, it's becoming more and more valuable.
Right.
And so there's all these exit strategies. You can sell it anywhere along the line. After you build the entire thing, you can hold it and then sell it. And then multiple exit strategies means like you could sell them as individual houses, in 10-unit houses. You can condo convert the entire thing and then make it so that there's an HOA and everybody just owns what's inside. And then you can just hold it, or you can sell it off, or you can just keep it. There's all these different strategies, and it's kind of an exciting play. But one of the things I did want to mention is multifamily value add is a fantastic opportunity that people have been talking about for probably a decade now. And there's so much competition in it that people are kind of veering off. They can't find the deals that they were able to 4 years ago. So they're kind of moving into, either heavy lift or senior living or assisted living or student housing or some A class, or, the value add are still in play, but they're kind of deviating and trying these new ways of accessing the multifamily commercial space. Right. And in some cases they're doing development, right? So development is an interesting play that's extremely lucrative for the capital raiser, extremely lucrative for the limited partner. On these 506C deals, typically we can invest limited partner money and double it very quickly in comparison to what we could in the value add space.
Interesting, but it obviously it takes a little more time, would you say, than those typical value add hold periods, or are you finding the same projected timeframes?
So it's all over the place because everybody's got a different business model. In Phoenix, my friends like Zach Captainstall, they're turning apartment complexes in less than 2 years, which sounds insane. And then in other markets, people are using a business model to hold them for 10 years, or family offices are just holding them forever. So it depends on what you're trying to do and what your play is and how you're returning investor money. But that's a big question, right? It's like, if you're in the development space, how fast can you get your investor money back to them? Right. And part of it is like, what market are you investing in? In a secondary market, like the ones that we select in Louisiana and Alabama, the cities are in growth mode and are in massive shortage of affordable housing. So they're helping you get things entitled very quickly, versus you go into a space like Phoenix, Atlanta, or Dallas, and you may have a lot more red tape to cross with the city, and it's going to take longer to get the investor money returned. So part of it is like, where are you investing? What's your strategy? What is your end goal? In Phoenix, which I want to do build to rent here too at some point, it may be a completely different play than what I'm doing out in Louisiana, because here I might want to do an infill development instead of a big subdivision, and it may be faster and more lucrative for me to do so. But, there's different ways to make money, and you just got to find what resonates with you and select a market that pertains to what your strategy is.
100%. I mean, that's probably the most important factor, is finding the market, because every market, like you said, is different, has different valuations, but like more importantly, the timing. I mean, dealing with municipalities or cities is a nightmare in some places, and other places they're delightful to work with because they want to get this out faster than you do.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Let me switch gears a little bit, because I do love the fact that you are a podcaster. I'm partial to that. Tell me a little bit about some of like the most interesting guests or the most interesting interviews that you've done that have just like blown you away.
What I always thought at the beginning was like the guys that have like the big level status would be the most downloaded shows. Yeah. And I found that to not be true. I mean, particularly for the ones that don't engage on social media because they're so big that they don't have time for the retail investor and spending those, that time on there. But the most interesting shows for me have always been mindset or spiritual or even metaphysical kind of stuff where we're kind of going down rabbit holes that we have no business talking about on a capital raiser or a real estate podcast. Those ones have always been my favorite. So Tyler Chester, Ola Dontis stands out. And there was this one with, I forget his name, the guy from Sharma's Karma. And we talked about the metaphysician and I don't know, it was crazy. Like we went into all the spiritual avenues. It just went down crazy rabbit holes talking about how to attract a deal to you instead of you going and chasing the deal and how you do that from a spiritual perspective. Those are always my favorite ones.
Yeah. We spoke some spiritual stuff on this podcast also with him also. That was an interesting one. You and I spoke, we got into the spiritual level a little bit, I recall. I think because that's something that you, because it's something you enjoy. It's something you enjoy talking about. And when it moves you, it's much easier to just bring it out of others.
I didn't know that I would ever, because I used to daydream about one day I'm going to write a spiritual book. And I kind of set that intention. And then later on, the universe kind of wanted me to do something like that, but not necessarily the way that I had envisioned it in my mind. And I realized that I have this podcast and this platform where I can talk about the same things and provide value in a different way, still kind of getting to the end goal, which was to share a spiritual message, like go and be at peace. Don't necessarily like hustle the hardest, but hustle the smartest. And be in alignment with your creator and follow and practice the golden rule, all stuff that I really love to dive into on my show.
You could literally take, pull out all of those pieces of wisdom that have come through the show throughout the years, or have someone do it for you and just create a book like that.
We'll probably do that down the road. There's definitely a lot of people that I want to co-author a book with. I'm in the process of working with Richard C. Wilson. We're getting ready to write a book. We should be wrapping up the finalization on our new LLC together and our new brand. And there's people like Annie Dickerson, who I'd love to write a book with, that just kind of dives into, because you can only spend so much time with a guest about their business model and what they're trying to accomplish. But we did a series, Annie and I, where we dove into every little specific part of the capital raising process, like the marketing, how do you attract investors? How do you create an avatar? How do you brand a website? How do you keep investors warm between deals? And you can't really go into massive detail about that when you're asking people on a regular basis about their story.
Right.
So we can take an entire book just from that series that we did easily.
Absolutely. And you probably should. I mean, that's like, why not? It's really a matter of finding the content. I'm not one to talk because I haven't written a book yet, but it's something that I've talked about and I've definitely considered. And
I would buy your book.
There's so much content that I've created and that anyone who has a podcast or is active on social media has created. If you pull it all together, you could definitely create a book from it. And
that's some people's strategy. I think a lot of podcasters have just taken episodes and repurposed the content into books, or, just extra social media content.
Yeah.
Right? Let's chop up this podcast that I did with XYZ and then provide value to people. And then they're probably going to share it because their name is on it. Right. So it kind of is a very effective strategy for getting people to know, like, and trust you.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, like in that triangle, the know, like, and trust triangle, a lot of people, if you ask them what's most important about raising capital, is it the like, is it the trust, is it the know? And people will say, I could never do business with somebody I don't trust. And other people are like, well, I have to like them or else I won't do business with them. But they can't ever like or trust you if they don't know you. Right. So a lot of people are very focused on, how do I convert one person to two persons out of every 10? And my friend Hunter Thompson likes to talk about, instead of that being your focus, how about you figure out how to be in front of 10,000 people? So then you can take your same conversion ratio, but now you're in front of a whole bunch of people instead of just a very small audience.
100%.
Brilliant strategy.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. I think the most, I mean, and you do it, by the way, you do a great job of cutting up the little portion they're saying, pulling out content from the video, from the podcast. I mean, I still remember the one that you did with me. It was like the ferocious, you don't know why. I was like, what?
That's good. Yeah. I take a lot of pride into that. That's actually how I think I got my name out there, is by creating content that nobody else was willing to do, because it's just not cost effective to do. To take a video and chop it into 30 different time-stamped pieces, condense it down into a 2-minute thing. Like, in order to have somebody do that for you, they're probably could charge you $200 an episode. And that's how people really kind of, I think, saw me and what made me stand out at the very beginning. And it's been a very creative process for me. It almost feels like it's like my way of being the Picasso painter, right? So like, I get to create, chop up the video exactly how I want it, take the pieces that I love the most, and then condense it down and put transition and make it sexy. And then when I promote that, whoever the person that was on the show is just like, wow, I sound so good. Yeah. How did you make me sound so good?
And then they're so much more willing to share that and to put that out there to everyone else.
So it was a good strategy at the beginning, but it's very challenging to keep up with it. I can record a lot more episodes now than I can produce video content for. So I'm looking at changing up my style, but I think that's one of the things that put me on the map.
It certainly did. I can attest to that. I mean, you've definitely have a brand that sticks, and a show that has been downloaded by plenty of people out there. And what I love most about it is, again, like you said earlier on, there's a niche, involved in it. I mean, everyone who knows what this show is, they know what the theme behind it is. And so they can learn and they can go through series and see what different things they can take out from it.
Yeah. A lot of people say, when you're creating a brand, make sure that in the title of your brand, whatever it is that you're doing is very easily recognizable. Mm-hmm. So with the Capital Raiser show, they know what they're there for, right?
Exactly.
So it's fantastic. Or, in your case, they already know you as the king of cost seg. So as soon as they see Yona Weiss, they're like, I know what I'm going to get a little bit here. Probably some really good value add, some good energy, and let's sprinkle in a little bit of cost seg. So I know to go to that dude when it's time for me to get a cost seg study on my commercial real estate property.
Exactly.
It's a very effective strategy.
Yeah, for sure. They know they're going to get me. And really that's really what it is. They know it. Then they can come to like and trust it. But Ruben, I want to transition now to what we call the final four. These are 4 questions that we ask all the guests. First question for you. What is the worst job that you ever had?
The worst job I ever had was a waiter at a corporate American style restaurant called Bahama Breeze, where we had to wear these Hawaiian shirts and we would get audited. They would if you didn't ask them to potentially, get a dessert or whatever, you would be marked and check marked as somebody who failed the audit or whatever. And then we had to wear these stupid shoes and do these presentations about the food that we're cooking, which it might be like something with a side of couscous and some chicken. And like, I had to have all that stuff memorized. Hated that job, but it was funny. I still make fun of myself for having that position when I could have chosen many other restaurants that would have been a lot better to work at.
Yeah. Well, you live and learn, and good memories, I'm sure. At least good stories come out of it. You have a good answer for the show. There you go. You never know. What is a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
So a lot of people will say Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is a great one. However, I really want to focus on my favorite book of all time, which is done by Wayne Dyer. It's called The Power of Intention. That really changed my perception of how to be a human being in terms of being peaceful and attracting peace to yourself and being grateful for the things as if you already have them in your life as a form of manifesting them and attracting those realities to yourself. It really changed my entire perception of how I operate as a human being and living the golden rule in order to have the power to manifest. I highly recommend that book. Can't speak highly enough about it.
Love it. Well, we'll definitely put that in the show notes. And anyone who's interested in checking that out, click that link and you will find your destiny. And it will become your destiny because you'll read the book. Right? There you go. Third question. What's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
So I think we chatted a little bit about it. Obviously, I want to master capital raising at a higher level. But one of the things that I'm really flawed at is outsourcing, right? So we talked about how I'm doing all of the video auditing and nobody can ever do it as good as me. But at some point, the best value for your time may be talking to investors or capital raisers or fund managers. And that may be worth more than $200 an hour. It's probably closer to $500 to $1,000 an hour. And it's very hard to let go because I have so much pride in the work that I do. I don't want to give somebody else to do it and then have them taint my brand and not create the content that I think is worthy of my brand. So, but that's something that people have to go through when they're scaling in their businesses. Can I let go of some of the things that I do to let other people come in and help me grow this thing even bigger?
Absolutely. It's something I struggle with a lot also. I mean, I definitely outsource some stuff, but others, I have the same exact feelings towards, and I don't want something to come off, coming from me, but not having the same quality or the same amount of, my personality that I would want it to have.
I can totally relate. So I'm sure in many businesses, people feel that way.
Yeah. Just letting go, gotta get over it and figure out ways to do it. Fourth and final question, Ruben, what does success mean to you?
So I've done a lot of personal development, and I came across this gentleman named Earl Nightingale who had the best definition of success that I've heard. And he says that success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal. So what success means to me, based off of that definition, which is my favorite that I've heard so far, is as long as you're moving towards the things that you want to do in your own life and you're taking steps towards that, then you are successful. And I really resonate with that, because if you are seeking something that you love to do and taking steps towards being that and contributing that to the world, then I consider you a success, versus somebody that just does it for the money and then they find themselves rich in a mansion and completely miserable because they have nothing that they're contributing to the world at that point. So as long as you can find something that you want to grow towards becoming and are taking steps towards that, that is the key to success, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, you're on the path, and that's it. If you're on the journey, like, you're already there. It's a big difference between, being somewhere. And like you said, if you think that when you achieve something is going to make you happy, then you're not happy or you're not successful along the way in getting that, then once you reach that goal, you won't actually be happy, because you realize, well, now what, right? Like, now what? Yeah. I think a lot of people hit that point in their lives and like, well, now what, right?
Yeah, because it's not whether or not you hit the goal, it's whether or not you're having fun and being fulfilled along the way.
Absolutely. Well, that was our little spiritual digression for this show. Not too much of a digression, but that was awesome, Ruben. Where can our listeners find you or reach out to you?
LinkedIn is a great option. They can find out about my deals and my company at Legacy Acquisitions, or if they want to check out the show, capitalraisershow.com would be a great avenue.
Awesome. Well, we will certainly put out all that in the show notes, and I hope everyone takes the time to follow you and follow your show and check out everything that you guys are doing, because doing great stuff, and much continued success, and look forward to speaking again soon.
The feeling is mutual, Yona, man. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you for joining once again, all the way till the end. And you get a brownie. But really, what I want to leave you with is the message that I always leave out with, is the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.